An unemployed tenant is upset that a landlord is refusing to accept rental assistance money because they feel she won't be able to pay going forward. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have kind of a funny story for you today, and it's going over this tenant who, for some reason, is upset that the landlord won't accept this rental assistance money, right? So a lot of landlords, they don't want to have to deal with these, third-party rental assistance programs, these government programs, because those programs are temporary. They're not going to be paying the person's rent forever, and the landlord knows this, right? So they just would rather get that tenant out of their unit and get a tenant in there who is able to pay on their own, especially in the case of tenants that they have a strong belief aren't ever going to become, financially capable of paying the rent. Okay, so that is exactly what's going on in this story here. And it's really funny reading it because the tenant covered in the story admits that she doesn't have a job. Okay, so it doesn't really make sense that she's upset that the landlord is doing the best thing for their own financial interest, right? And I'm in agreement. I'd have to say that I would have a difficult time as the landlord, believing that this lady who doesn't have a job suddenly is going to be able to pay the rent. Okay, so I mean, what say you? Before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think, okay? Would you accept rental assistance, temporary rental assistance for a tenant who you didn't believe was going to be capable of paying the rent going forward? Now, keep in mind that we did just go through this whole pandemic issue, right? And, a lot of that rental assistance money, I even received some of it from a tenant, right? But my tenant was capable of getting a job and paying the rent going forward after they received that assistance. But if you had a tenant who you didn't believe was capable of it, would you accept the money? That's the question, okay? So this article is coming from ktvb.com, and it says, Ada County landlord refuses rent payment from third-party assistance. And the article has a little video with it, and I'll play that for you right now.
Danette has to come up with $565 a month to pay lot rent, where she parks the family trailer.
I'm scared I'm going to get evicted, and I'm just waiting for that, on my door.
Danette called St. Vincent de Paul for their rental assistance program. To qualify, applicants typically need a job.
The lady she was amazing. Her name is Catherine, and she went to bat for me. She didn't have to do that, and she's like, okay, well, I got them to pay the rent.
A stroke of luck only lasted so long because the payment didn't come from Danette. It came from St. Vincent de Paul, leading her landlord to land another punch.
The landlord actually called St. Vincent's and was like, well, I consulted with my lawyers and they said we can't take third-party checks, which is ridiculous to me. I literally it doesn't make any sense to me. I have someone here willing to pay my rent and you won't take the payment. I really don't understand it.
Rental assistance nonprofit Jesse Tree says they've seen this before.
Right.
Executive Director Ali Rabi even says it's legal.
Unless the lease agreement says differently, usually the tenant is required to pay the rent, and landlords are not necessarily legally obligated to take money from somebody else.
Rabi says most landlords are willing to work with tenants who need help, but not all.
They don't think the tenant's going to be able to pay rent moving forward, and they just want to get a new tenant.
All right, you saw the video, so let's get into the article. Danette Brookshire received rental assistance from St. Vincent de Paul to pay her September rent bill, but her landlord refused the payment because it came from a third party. The landlord actually called St. Vincent and said, I consulted with my lawyers and said we can't take third-party checks, which is ridiculous to me, Brookshire said. It doesn't make any sense to me. I have someone here willing to pay my rent, but you won't take the payment? I really don't understand. Well, the landlord talked to their lawyer, okay? And the lawyer probably told them what they would tell anyway. Hey, if you accept rent from this payment, you cannot proceed with the tenant's eviction, okay? If you accept this third-party payment, then you cannot proceed with the eviction. You can't get this tenant out of there. And if the landlord wanted her out of there for whatever reason, then he needs to just turn that payment down and move on with the eviction process. Brookshire received this rental assistance after a rough August. The court finalized her divorce and she lost her job. Divorce is very expensive, especially after 20 years of a divorce, Brookshire said. We have a good relationship, which I am thankful for. Brookshire is still on the hook for $565 monthly rent bill. She is actively looking for jobs and has 2 interviews lined up in as many days. However, regaining employment does not solve her problem inherently. It's still going to take me at least 2 weeks to get a paycheck, Brookshire said. Is that going to cover what I'm behind? Then here comes rent again on October 5th in a couple weeks. It's very stressful. So she's already behind on rent, okay? And then it's going to be at least a couple of weeks before she gets her first paycheck. She's not going to immediately pay her landlord with her first paycheck. She's probably going to buy food and, other stuff that she needs. So it's not going to be, that money is going directly to the landlord. And even if she was able to pay the landlord with that money, is it going to cover all of the rent that she's behind? Probably not. And that's what they're not saying in this article. How much does she actually owe this landlord? And how long has it been since she has paid rent? How long did it take her to get the rental assistance? That might be part of the reason why the landlord is so reluctant to take it and just really wants her up out of there. I mean, I know for a fact that even if some program came up to me and said, hey, here's that last year worth of rent that your tenant owes you, and, my tenant's been sitting in there for a year not paying, I'd be like, you know what? Yeah, another month or 2 until I can get her evicted isn't so bad, but at least I'll have somebody in here who's paying now. But I'm not sure what's going on in this situation, but I'm just saying that there are good reasons why landlords wouldn't want to take that rental assistance money, okay? And it's ridiculous that she's sitting here and she said, hey, she lost her job and that her rent's only $565 a month. I mean, that is cheap. I don't know where she lives. I mean, it looks like rural Idaho. I mean, I guess that might be a lot of money for rural Idaho. Who knows, right? But it's not a lot of money for where I live, okay? That's a very cheap rent. You could work almost anywhere and make that rent up, right? And if she wasn't able to pay it, then that is really telling, and that might be why the landlord didn't want to accept it. So, yeah, I can't say that I'm on her side right now. And, it's supposed to be a hard luck story, and you're supposed to feel bad for her, and like, why won't this landlord take this money? Listen. The property owner can do as they please with their property. They don't have to run their business according to the tenant, what the tenant is dictating them to do, okay? Landlords are not required to accept payment from a third party to fulfill the lease agreement, according to Jesse Tree Executive Director Ali Rabe. I don't know if it's been litigated in Idaho or other states, but unless the lease agreement says differently, usually the tenant is required to pay the rent, Rabe said. Landlords are not required to take the money from anybody else. Most landlords who work with Jesse Tree are accommodating for tenants who need extra assistance, according to Rabe. However, that is not always the case. They don't think the tenant's going to be able to pay rent moving forward. They just want to get a new tenant, Rabe said. And that guy at least understands how it works. They don't think the tenant's going to be able to pay moving forward, which in many cases they're not. Right? And they just want a new tenant. So if that is the case, and that is what the landlord believes, then the landlord has the right to say, hey, I'm not going to attempt to continue to rent to this person anymore. Now, I did a little short video, and it was an eviction judge, right? And she had a great line in this video, right? And this eviction judge said that hardship, right, is not an excuse for non-payment of rent. And simply put, that is something that we have to understand. Everyone goes through hardship. Everyone, okay? There's always going to be more expenses that are coming up, popping up out of nowhere. You need to make sure that you have your finances right and get your bills paid. And non-payment of rent just because you're going through this divorce or, lost your job or whatever, or suffering medical emergency, that is not an excuse for non-payment of rent. You need to get on top of it. And if you can't, well, you just need to leave.